In this module, we're going to discuss how you start planning your deployment and all the ideas and things that you need to consider when you're doing your planning. What you're going to learn in this module is, first off, we're going to look at the different considerations that we need to look at to identify what are our business requirements or the objectives of what we want to do with this product. Also, what are the operating systems and the platform hardware that we have to have that's supported for this particular version of this product. We will identify the components that are included with ENS. We'll look at the legacy solutions that we can migrate. And then we'll also look at the key parts of your deployment plan. In the overview of this planning module, we're going to talk about the requirements, your hardware and software, the ports that need to be used, a tech check, your pilot and rollout, and the change control that you need to implement in your planning. When you're getting started with your planning, you need to think about different requirements, like what are your business requirements or objectives? What components are you going to use? Are you going to install just the threat prevention, or are you going to also have the firewall and the web control? What components is it that you actually want to have? You don't have to start off with all three of them, but you can have it where I can start off with one and then add one of the other components as I go along. Do I have any other security products that are running in parallel that has to do with my network? Also, the idea that I might want to use the DXL or TIE. What kind of EPO environment am I going to have? Am I going to have the EPO on-premise, the cloud EPO, or am I going to do this where it's standalone and I'm not using EPO at all? What are the platform requirements that I need to have? Do all my machines work with this? And my different endpoints and what operating systems? And then do I have any other type of solutions that I'm going to integrate in with the threat intelligence? Currently, the supported platforms that we have, to remind you, is the McAfee on-premise is supported with version EPO 5.1.1 as a minimum, but we do recommend that you have the most current EPO server. At this time, we would recommend EPO 5.3x, so even though we have 5.3.1, you might want to think about whatever is the most current patch. We do recommend that you have the latest version of the McAfee agent. If you're using EPO Cloud, make sure that it is at least at minimum version 5.2. We do recommend 5.4, and the same thing with the McAfee agent. The self-managed, where you don't have the EPO server, at least have the latest version of the McAfee agent. At minimum, have version 5.03, but at least, it's recommended that you have version 5.04 or later. From this list of supported endpoint operating systems for Microsoft Windows, if you'll notice, this list contains all of the current Windows Server operating systems. If you will note, we do support 2016 all the way down to 2008 and that Windows Small Business Server 2011. But be sure to always refer to the KB article, KB 82761, for the latest versions of operating systems that are supported. In a continuation of the supported endpoint operating systems, Windows 10, Windows 8.1, Windows 8, Windows 7, and Windows Embedded Standard 7. If you'll notice, we do not support any of the older legacy versions of Windows. But with Apple Macintosh, you see that we have a KB article that lists those. It's KB 84934. But if you'll notice, we support the El Capitan, the Maverick, Sierra, and Yosemite. And the continuation of the supported endpoint operating systems, if you'll notice, we do support Linux, and there's a whole list of the Linux versions that we do support, so I would recommend that you look at the KB article 87073. So the list of supported browsers for Microsoft Windows utilizing the web control, we do support Firefox, Chrome, and Internet Explorer. At this time, we do not support Microsoft Edge. For your Macintosh computers, we do support Safari 7.1 or later. And just understand, if you have any self-managed systems, all the browsers are allowed by default whether or not they're supported or not supported. The types of software we have for Windows on the installation is we have this Endpoint Suite installer. Note that we have a KB article that's associated with that if you have host intrusion prevention installed. But that one is a product that gives you an easy installation of EPO and automatically checks in all the components. So that would be for a customer who doesn't have a pre-existing EPO, but it will take care of getting the EPO installed along with everything that has to do with ENS. We have another tool called the Endpoint Security Package Designer, which what we have with this is if you have a customer who wants to actually repackage the current installation product where it comes with the latest DATs, maybe it has a certain configuration settings, you can use a package Endpoint Security Package Designer. We also have an Endpoint Security Standalone Installer, which you can download and just install the product manually. The type of extensions that you have available to add to your EPO server is you have one that's the Adaptive Threat Protection, which is optional. You have the different helps that has to do with the platforms. You have firewall, and you also have the threat prevention help and the web control help. And then you also have the different extensions for the platform, the firewall, threat prevention, and web control. The packages, which are separate, is the fact that you need to deploy the product. So you would have a package that has to do with the adaptive threat protection, the firewall, threat prevention, and the web control. For the Linux version of the ENS software, you have the Endpoint Security for Linux PGP public key that gives the public key to do the package verification. We also have a standalone install package for the Endpoint Security for Linux. The extensions that go on the EPO server, and also the packages that you would import onto the EPO server. The ENS software that's for Macs, we have a standalone installer for the Mac. We also have the extensions that are imported onto the EPO server, and the packages, again, that has to do with the firewall, the threat prevention, and the web control for the Mac. The optional extensions that we have that are available for your EPO server for the ENS product is that, one, we have the Endpoint Migration Assistant, that this particular extension helps you migrate your policy and settings from all the different legacy products. We have an Endpoint Upgrade Assistant that helps you determine, can my environment be ready for deploying ENS? Maybe I have some machines out there that are not supported just yet. And then we also have the Adaptive Threat Protection that takes care of all of that adaptive threat protection module that we're going to talk about later. As a reminder, the default ports that exist on EPO are the fact that you have the normal TCP port 80, where the agent to server has its communication. Many customers change this port upon installation of the EPO server. We also have port 443, which is the secure communication, has to do with your McAfee agent in the EPO server. Other ports like ports 21, port 80, 443, all of those have to do with the product updates, that when your machine needs to get the new AM core or the DATs, it has to go to either an FTP server, a web server, or if you have a UNC path, or you use a super agent distributed repository. It depends on the type of repository that you've got set up in your environment. And again, TCP port 1433 and 1434 all has to do with EPO being able to communicate with the SQL Server, because as a reminder, everything that has to do with your environment with EPO is all stored in Microsoft SQL Server. So be sure you do not have a firewall that prevents your machines from talking to your EPO server and your EPO server talking to the machines, and if you have any agent handlers, that your EPO server can also communicate with those, and everybody can communicate with the SQL Server. And everybody, what I mean is the EPO server and agent handlers. And a little tech check, we want you to think about, before I get started, I need to document what hardware and network configuration that I have in my network. How many EPO servers do I have, even though you only have one, possibly. All the different operating systems. Do I have any other agent handlers? And how's my EPO server configured? Where are my repositories? Anything that has to do with just EPO in your network. Then, how available is my EPO server? How's the interface working? Do I need to do some maintenance on my EPO server? What dashboards and reports are we going to use to make sure that we are effective in our protection of our environment? What policies are we currently using? Especially when we're going to start thinking about the migration, you may have some policies that exist in EPO, but you really don't want to migrate them. They're not being assigned anywhere. Also, to document all my computers out there, all the endpoints, like where are they located, what operating systems, what versions of ENS software do you have, their patches. All of this can be done utilizing the queries that exist in EPO. And after that, start documenting all the accounts, the credentials, and permissions that you have to use to utilize the EPO environment. You may want to create some more user accounts that maybe they're just going to be doing some reporting. The McAfee Endpoint Upgrade Assistant, just understand that this is a nice little add-on that I can put on my EPO server. It's an extension, and what it will do is it will analyze your environment and help you know, do I have some machines that are not ready? It will also check in the upgrade automation client package. Everything is always accessed from the EPO. You can look at the software section and see it. It will look at all your computers out there and reference their configuration. It will also determine what is the required software that you have to have, and is it installed in the appropriate branches on your EPO server, and what updates may be required. Just understand, it does not change your EPO environment. You do have to have at least EPO version 5.1.2, and if you have any other third-party products out there, it does not support the provisioning for those products. Key features of the Endpoint Upgrade Assistant is that first it will analyze your environment, tell you what products you have, reports on the minimum requirements, and then what I can do is go in and tag my systems or create my deployment tasks, whatever you need to do. So after it analyzes, then it can help you prepare what is the software modules that you have to have. Helps you plan, like identify what are the deployment steps you need to have to get your machines ready. You can even export the details of your systems, and I can have it in a little spreadsheet file. I can also tag endpoints, so I can have a deployment task that will be assigned having to do with that tag. And then I have the different queries and reports that you can utilize to make sure that I have everything that I need. As an example of how you can use this tool, first off, what you will do is you go in and you select from the menu of the EPO server, Software, Endpoint Upgrade Assistant. You'll receive the welcome page. Then I select an option on the Select Product Reference Configuration drop-down box. For example, this one I can select McAfee Endpoint Security 10.5. Then I can select one or the more options in the select environment to analyze. Then after that, I click the Analyze Environment. Depending on how many endpoints that I have, it may take a while for this to load. Everything is stored in your database, so you can go out and you can run a report and get more analysis. This shows you an example of what it would look like when it's done. You actually can see where it's all color-coded, and you get a readiness summary. So I can look at this particular page and get an idea of just how I am doing. So you'll see if I have blue, installation is complete, ready to go. Green, I'm ready to upgrade. Yellow, I might need to do some product upgrades. Red, these systems are excluded. If it's light blue, it's not a managed system. If it's light red, then this machine is not compatible. I can click on the link to view the system detail. I can also click and export the system and product details to look at later. It can be in a CSV file. I can also click and select Show Unmanaged Systems if I need to see the unmanaged systems. I can use the View Product Versions drop-down to customize my view. The options for that is I can view all, require product upgrade, and no longer supported. On this screen you'll see that I have a system link that shows here's a particular machine, and if you'll notice I see that I have a machine that's ready, and then I'll also see where I have a machine that's incompatible. In identifying my particular machine, I can scroll down and look at a page that gives me other information as to what product will be replaced if you do have one, what minimum versions are supported, incompatible and unmanaged systems. I'll see whether or not they're currently excluded, so we'll exclude them because they have other McAfee products that have to be excluded. An unmanaged system, you need to install the McAfee agent and make sure it is managed, and then I can reanalyze that. An incompatible system, well, this machine is one that it doesn't have the right hardware or operating system. And then on the bottom of the page I can click Tag Systems, and so I can tag them to do whatever I need to do with them, like this system cannot be upgraded, whatever else you want to do that has to do with tagging them, like I need to assign some tasks, and I can assign those having to do with that tag. Then I need to be able to verify the software is available, so this tool gives me the ability to select Prepare, and then I can go in and see all the information that has to do with the deployment prerequisites. You can see software package, the required version, what you have in the branches on the repository of the EPO server, and if you have an extension that needs to be required. If there's anything that's missing, just add those packages to the EPO server and then go back in here and select the Reload Client Package branch, and then I can see, you know, the changes then, and it'll let you know that you're up to date. Next, I can click the little Plan tab and I can look at what are the steps that I have to do to upgrade the products in my environment. What is the best way to do it? So what it'll do is it'll put it in two categories. Endpoints that can be upgraded automatically, and endpoints that require maybe one or more manual upgrade steps before they can use the upgrade automation. You'll see little icons, you'll see the green ones that tell you what are the required steps that you have to do this upgrade. You'll also have endpoints that cannot be upgraded and what products are not supported by using the upgrade automation. Then I can tag these systems for upgrades later on, then select the tab and use my deployment task for that tag, and it'll take care of that. As a reminder, always remember that whenever you add an extension, the extension adds in there queries and dashboards. So we have some default queries that you can use. So with this particular endpoint upgrade assistant, we actually have several queries that are added by default. We have one so you have an analyze table. We have a categories chart, a categories table, and a plan table. So you can use these queries to create your own reports. You can duplicate these queries and make any customization that you want. You can even save them in three types of formats: PDF, XML, CVS, and HTML. I forgot about the fourth format. But you can use those and see what you have to do, and you can use those for your job. After I do my analysis, and if I made any change in the environment, I can actually go back into this tool and click Reanalyze the Environment to verify my readiness. In addition, if I want to do a different type of analysis, I can click the Start Over button. In deploying the client package, we have two different ways that you can do this from the EPO. We have a tool called Product Deployment, and it's where you can actually create a project that helps you streamline your deployment process by putting all the steps together into one task. Then I can use that task to get my product deployed out to all my machines. You can also see that they have been updated, which ones have failed, which ones are in progress. There's many tools that you can do with that, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. The other is the client deployment task, where I can go to the client task catalog and I can create my individual tasks, and then I can assign them in the system tree, or I can assign them by a tag. Here's an example of a flowchart to give you the steps that you normally do that has to do with your deployment. So what you do is you'll start your deployment, you'll download the packages, make sure I don't have any conflicting products, make sure that the McAfee agent and the ENS product are the correct versions, upgrade any of my virus scan policies, remove any legacy products, upgrade the McAfee agent, install the ENS, and then run my reports and note that my deployment is finished at that point. In planning your pilot, it's very crucial that you think about what are the different steps I need to do. So this is where I can identify and resolve any issues that I might have without actually impacting my environment. So one of the things that we want you to think about is, what are your specific goals? What are the exposure areas that you have and recent incidents that you might have? What prevention and detection needs do you have? What systems might be the most vulnerable? Which systems are a priority? Do you need to follow regulations? Like, I have to reduce my vulnerabilities in my user community or system group. So one of the things that we want you to think about is think about your goals and considerations. Try to use ideally a test environment before you go to actually real world, but you could use both environments. Do your migration, come up with a strategy for the pilot, and then set your timing expectations and determine how do we measure our success. So in your pilot goals and considerations, the first step in your tuning process is try to identify what is our protection strategy. So I want to look at what are my exposures or incidents that we've had in the audits. What's my tech check? What's my EPO managed environment? How is it set up? What systems are my priorities? Who are most vulnerable? Come up with a baseline for my policies. What are the rules that we have to have? What's your target user community, your permissions, the different roles, and do you have to follow any regulations? Many of our customers, they have to determine, let me try to do a lab test before I actually put this in the real world, in my real environment, because there's always that risk that we might shut down a very important server or mess things up. So we want to test and make sure that it works. So you can start off with having a lab environment where it's very controlled. You can do some testing, but of course lab has its limitation, because you're not going to see all the things that you really will see in the production environment. Of course, the production environment, basically I would start with just a certain select machines, make sure that it's all working. Before then I can roll it out. But you could use the combined model if that works good for you. Okay? But basically, make sure that you have easy physical access to any of your pilot systems that you have out there before you roll this out. When you're thinking about your migration, you want to think about which legacy policies or tasks that I want to migrate. So you need to look at your host intrusion prevention, what firewall policies, what general policies, the host IPS catalog, and your different IPS rules. If you're going to migrate any of the Mac products, we have the McAfee Endpoint Protection for Mac and the Virus Scan for Mac that you can migrate. The Site Advisor Enterprise, you can migrate the client tasks and policies. And once again, the Virus Scan Enterprise, you can migrate the client tasks and your server or workstation policies, or both. So you need to really think about which policies that I want. I can go in, and you're going to see that we have an automatic migration or a manual. But you want to think about the fact, do I want to migrate or do I want to start over from scratch? The two options that we have for migration is you have automatic or manual. The automatic is recommended that you use that if you have less than 250 managed machines. You don't have to do a lot of customization. You're going to actually edit your policies after you get migrated, and you don't have to do any supervision. The manual migration is you have more than 250 managed machines. You have a lot of complex or multiple custom policy settings that you need to change. You want to fine tune it at the same time that you're actually doing the migration. And I want to supervise and approve the steps as I'm going along. We're going to go through these guidelines on the next pages. Before I begin, some migration guidelines we want you to think about. Make sure you have the minimum software requirements. Think about consolidating the different policies or tasks so I can simplify it. Remove any policies that I'm not using anymore. Look at your wildcards that you have in your exclusions. We will talk more about wildcards later on, but threat prevention requires an absolute path for your root level exclusions. Look and see which policies and settings are better suited for automatic migration and which ones are better suited for the manual. An example is I have some custom policies and I want to do the manual policies first. After that, then I can do the automatic migration later for possibly the host IPS catalog. Because the host IPS catalog can only be migrated using the automatic migration. Make sure you migrate before you actually deploy your clients because you want to make sure that they get the correct policy. Also, let everybody know when the migration date is going to happen. And while you're doing the migration, make sure no one else is logged into the EPO server and making any types of modifications to the existing policies. Because if they make any changes while I'm doing the migration, it will not show up in my new policies. And also, look at the compatibility level of your SQL Server. We have a KB article that's real important that you have to have the compatibility level set for SQL 2008. Our KB article is 86470. In your pilot strategy, you need to be sure that you identify and resolve any issues before you actually roll out the enterprise. So first, be sure you verify that all your solution requirements are met, that you have finished your migration, the operating systems that you have out there are up to date and they can communicate with your EPO server, and that also you have administration access to your pilot systems. Then identify which are your targeted systems and your users. Make sure the health of the systems is good. Set the baseline of your policies and your settings so you have your benchmarking set. Make sure it's very simple. Follow any compliance or regulation requirements and think about all your potential risks. Then be sure you communicate to all the different stakeholders. Who's the contacts, what are their roles, what's their responsibilities. Make sure you've got to sign off on their approval. And think about what is your estimated duration and timeline. And what is the milestones that will make sure that you have achieved that. Then set your planned phases and activities. Set your expectations as to what you should have during each phase. And make sure you have your backup plans or any contingencies involved. So the phased approach in your pilot validation enterprise rollout is first do your validation, check your dashboards, look for your different events. What are the results of the test policies? Are you experiencing any system performance? Then your implementation, make sure it's staggered and prioritized as to which machines have the rollout. Do you have any production freezes, blackout dates, are there holidays, any other dates you have to think about? Start off with simple and move to complex and monitor what you're doing. The optimization, that's where you get your project momentum, everything's working, we've addressed any of the issues that we might have had. Do we have any improvements that need to happen? How efficient everything is, what's the performance that we need to change, and then what blocking functionality that we have to have on a rule-by-rule basis, especially when it comes to the desktop firewall. The recommended phases that we recommend that comes down to change control is make sure that you have in your preparation for your change, what's my initial planning and development of the change management strategy, then managing the change, implement your plan, add any other detail that you need to have, notify the proper people, and then reinforce the change. Get your data gathering. Do you have any corrective actions that must be done? And to check your understanding, from this list, which platform is customer owned and managed? Is it McAfee EPO on-premise, McAfee EPO Cloud, or McAfee Security Center? If you were to say the McAfee EPO on-premise, then you would be correct. Check your understanding, true or false. McAfee Agent is only required for McAfee EPO on-premise and cloud environments. True or false? If you said false, then you would be correct. Check your understanding, multiple choice. Choose the correct answer. You are deploying ENS 10.5 for use in an EPO on-premise environment. Which version of McAfee EPO is recommended? Is it 5.0, 5.1, 5.3x, or 5.5? If you answered 5.3x, you are correct. In review, we want to remind you of the key points that you have two different types of EPO supported management platforms. There's the EPO on-premise and the McAfee EPO Cloud. Always remember the core components of ENS is threat prevention, web control, and firewall. We can utilize the DXL, TIE, and MAR, but they are deployed separately and they can be integrated with the ENS. The EULA helps us assess our environment's deployment readiness so that we can see whether or not we are ready to roll this product out. It is an extension that you add to EPO, and so I can use it from the web interface of the EPO server. I can migrate from VirusScan Enterprise, Host Intrusion Prevention Firewall, and HIPS overall, and the Site Advisor. Be sure to pilot and test your results of the pilot before you roll out to your entire organization. And think about your structure for monitoring your solution and refine and optimize that solution as needed and necessary. This concludes the lecture on this module.